Welcome to HitPoint. It's the show where we talk about games, movies, TV shows, and anything else worth talking about. I'm your host, Andrew Jeffries, joined once again by co-host Jeremy Robbins. Jeremy, I don't have a fancy title to give you this week, but how are you doing?
I'm not doing too bad. It's September 13th. It's a Sunday. Just give people an idea of when we're recording this and give you an idea because we have a lot of news to talk about today. And if you're up to date with anything that's been going on in pulp culture, you'll have an idea of what's coming in this episode of what all we'll be discussing.
Yeah, lots and lots of news. I already know what the title of this episode is going to be, and it's going to be Oops, All News. I'm going to try to get a thumbnail with the Oops, All Berries Captain Crunch thing. It's just going to say Oops, All News. Make a note for Stephanie, please. I'm just kidding. Of course, I can do that myself. As always, we are supported on Patreon at patreon.com/hitpoint. Go there if you want to suggest some subjects for us to cover in the future. But we've got a lot of news to tackle. Any thoughts, Jeremy, before we get into it?
The only other thing I'd say is just so people are aware, if you haven't seen anything, so you might not be following us on all social platforms, as well as being supported on Patreon. We do have a Facebook page. We also have a Twitter account and an Instagram account, and we just recently have a subreddit. So if you want to join any of those things to just continue on discussions from things we talk about, just continue the discussion with us, or get little updates of news things that pop up during the week, that's where you would be able to see those things on those different social platforms.
Yeah, if you want really timely news, we're trying to be pretty active on Instagram in particular, as well as Reddit too. Reddit's a fun little platform to get on and share some news. But with all that being said, let's dive into our Oops, All News topics. So then our first one is the Xbox Series X. Finally, we have Microsoft coming out of the gate and telling us what the price is going to be of these next-gen consoles. And it's going to be $499 for the Series X, and the Series S, which was rumored to be around but finally confirmed, $299. And the main difference between those two is that the Series X is going to be a bit more beefy, a bit more powerful, optimized for 4K. The Series S is going to be optimized for 1440p, so a little bit higher than a HD resolution of 1080p. Any thoughts on finally having some pricing in hand, Jeremy?
I mean, it's about time. I made a note that in prior iterations of when consoles were being announced, by this time of the year, things were already out there. You knew everything from both Sony and Microsoft, and the excitement was already there. And everyone's been basically staring at their watches at this point saying, okay, when is something going to be announced? Because we're in September. If they're going to be actually released in November, previous years, we are in the countdown of 2 months away. And it's at least made some people nervous, myself included, is there going to be a limitation on how much there's going to be available of consoles? Is there not going to be as many at launch? Is that why they're pushing back announcing things? So it's nice to see something finally get announced. I mean, Xbox is coming out. It's on November. What day is it again?
That's you sprung that one on me. Let's see.
Isn't it the 13th or the 12th?
I was going to say the 10th, Series X release.
Or the 10th?
Let's see what Google has to say. It says 2020 holiday. Thank you, Google, for that useful. November 10th. That's what
the 10th.
news.xbox.com says. So I'd say that's a pretty reliable source for Xbox news.
Which is a Tuesday, so that's interesting because a lot of the releases normally have happened on a Friday.
Yeah, I'm kind of getting tired of this releasing stuff in the middle of a workday trend that I've been noticing this year. I am ready for some Friday evening releases for either information or showcases or a console now. Tuesday. That's an odd date, but okay. At least we know when it's coming finally. Same can't quite be said for the PlayStation 5 just yet. We don't know. Sony literally just announced, I want to say it was yesterday, as of time of recording, that they're going to be having a showcase on September 16th, which is in just a few days from now. And I think everybody's pretty well expecting to have finally some pricing. I would say the expectation is for them to at least match the price of the Series X. with the all digital console that they have for PlayStation 5 being maybe $100 cheaper. So that'll be interesting. What are your thoughts on that, Jeremy?
Yeah, I'm curious if they're going to do what they did last time. I mean, we're seeing what history repeat itself. In the last iteration, Sony announced the PS4 after Microsoft announced their system, and they undercut them.
Yeah,
and made theirs cheaper. So I'm curious now that since everyone played the waiting game and Sony won the waiting game, I guess you could say, are they actually going to try to undercut and take an even bigger loss on their system, hoping that people jump on their system instead? Or because the fact they have two systems as well, will they undercut them with the diskless version and make that one like $250 instead of $299? And then have the disc version be the same price as the Series X.
Yeah.
I mean, they have that wiggle room. Again, Sony's playing coy. They haven't confirmed they're talking about things on this coming Wednesday on the 16th. But like you said, everyone's expecting it now that Microsoft announced their stuff. Because if they don't do it when they're doing a PS5 showcase, they're going to have a lot of outrage from the fan base saying, sweet, we saw more games, but you gave us no news on the system still.
Right.
And the only thing we've heard is, hey, you can sign up to have a chance to pre-order the system through us.
Yeah.
But that's the only news that they've put out there about the PS5. And that's not sat well with anybody that's a Sony fan.
Yeah. This is an interesting console cycle because with the previous two console generations, there have been just clear bungles on one side or the other. I mean, with the PlayStation 3, Sony absolutely lost a lot of steam right at the announcement. Their whole announcement, 2006 E3, I want to say, was horrible. It was really bad. It was pretty embarrassing, and Microsoft really seized on that early in that whole console generation with the 360 and really made a cheap gaming machine that got a lot of people to buy it. Sony really picked up steam as that generation ended, and then the tables flipped completely with the Xbox One having an awful announcement where just it was very consumer unfriendly, very gamer unfriendly, very few gamer-centric features being showcased for the console. And then Sony turned right around, like you said, undercut it on the price, but also on a lot of the features that were available and were focused on was kind of that classic gaming experience continuing on into next generation with Sony. And I think it's been really interesting to see that neither side this time around has had any of those major blunders. They've both had really strong showings. I mean, Microsoft got some flack for for how it showed off Halo, and Halo being a little bit, I guess I would say, undercooked. But even then, like, undercooked being kind of the worst criticism you can throw towards kind of the Series X like showcase at this point is really good. It's still been very strong, and it's actually, to give a little peek into my personal life, has kind of swung me from getting a PlayStation 5 to getting an Xbox Series X right now, or at least planning to get a Series X, because they're just the ease of getting one is going to be a lot easier for me than getting a PlayStation 5 at the moment, or presumably what getting a PlayStation 5 is going to be like. But that's really kind of the coverage of our next gen consoles. Let's kind of jump into some more gaming news. Nintendo also kind of got in the spotlight for a bit for good and bad reasons, I would say. They announced Super Mario 3D All-Stars, which is a bundle of three of the biggest Super Mario games: Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, and Super Mario Galaxy, being bundled together for the Switch. Everybody was excited about those games. A lot less excitement for the limited availability window that Nintendo announced, which was through September 18th to March 31st. And I'm one of those people that is not excited about that. In my mind, there's really no good reason for it. Did you have any thoughts on that, Jeremy?
I'm not surprised by it. They did this back with the Wii. They released Super Mario, the original Super Mario All-Stars, the 25th anniversary edition 10 years ago on the Wii, and did the exact same thing. So I'm not surprised.
Mm. Yeah, I'm just not a fan of it. Like, I can understand that was at least a time before the digital storefronts were what they were. Physical was still very much king at that time. But nowadays, like, digital storefronts are so robust and well featured that I'd say about half the games that I buy, or half the games I was buying for the console, was physical, and half being digital, just kind of being where I could get the better deal. Um, I'm pretty frustrated by that because right now I'm not planning on getting it, but now I feel like I'm kind of being forced to buy a game that I'm not sure I want to get yet because I don't know if I can get it if I'll be able to get it at a good price. And I actually read this quote from Andrew Reiner at Game Informer. He had a quote that I pretty well resonated with, and that's this. It's quote, "These aren't issues that are limiting the release of Super Mario 3D All-Stars," and he was referring to some supply and demand type things before that. Nintendo's once again masterfully playing the supply and demand game with consumers. That's all this is, and it's shameful. If someone buys a Switch in April 2021 and wants to play Super Mario Galaxy on it, they should be able to without having to go online and purchase the game for an inflated price. I fear that's going to happen. I also have a bad feeling that if this limited release is successful, we're going to see it happen again, and not just from Nintendo. We shouldn't be on the clock with games. We shouldn't feel the pressure of having to buy a game or skin at a specific time. End the madness. And I think that was a pretty good encapsulation of how I was feeling, where there's really no good reason for it in 2020 anymore to have a limited release like that. Like, if you want to do like a really cool collector's edition that is a bit more special, that has sort of a limited release period, okay, fine, totally fine. But like, just leave the standard version for the rest of us to buy indefinitely. Like, I don't want to have to scrounge around on the third market to try to find a game maybe at some point. So yeah, I don't know. That's kind of where I landed with that issue.
Well, and I will say this, I think that is a very poignant quote. I think they're right. And sadly, it is going to be successful.
Yeah.
As of the end of last week, Amazon and Walmart is not taking any more pre-orders. They aren't selling the game anymore because they are out. And I don't know if anyone else is out yet. That's the last I saw. But that shows you it is going to be successful, and that's the ploy that Nintendo's doing. They're making it a limited edition thing, like they did 10 years ago. So that way, the fan base that wants these games are going to pre-order it and buy it now at the end of 2020, giving Nintendo a boost in sales. Potentially, if someone doesn't own a Switch and wants to get this game, or if they already have a Switch and they do buy this game for quarter 4, it's a complete marketing ploy. And yeah, it is shameful. But again, I'm not surprised because they did it 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was one of those that didn't buy the Super Mario All-Stars for the Wii and has tried to find it over and over again, and it was outrageously priced online. So I'm not surprised that this has happened. The thing I would agree as well with the quote is I am afraid it will happen again next year, because there are rumors now with Zelda's anniversary being their 35th anniversary being next year, there will likely be a special remastered collection for that as well.
Oh gosh, I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah.
And I won't doubt it. It will probably be a limited release.
Oh man, you just upped my stress levels.
Sorry.
I know you.
I know that there's a group of people out there that are really having hope that the reasoning why there's a limited availability window is because they may, after March, add in or release another version that has Super Mario Galaxy 2 on it. But that's just being super optimistic at this point. There's nothing out there that supports that ever happening.
Yeah.
A lot of people were upset that Super Mario Galaxy 2 was not on this collection, because that a lot of people prefer that one over the original Super Mario Galaxy.
Yeah, it is a very odd choice to exclude that from the collection. Seen as the same generation as Super Mario Galaxy, and it's like, why not just go the full way? Kind of makes me wonder if they'll offer that as kind of a DLC incentive at some point.
But if they do, then that even plays into more what they're saying is, why have a limited release if you're going to release DLC for a game? Like, I don't know. To me, it's one of those. It's limited right now, and it's to probably get the sales that they want in this next fiscal quarter.
Yeah.
but I think eventually it will become widely available. It maybe only digitally, but that's my optimism in it. Is at some point it will no longer be limited, but it would only be digitally that you could buy it rather than getting a physical copy.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, it's just sort of a sucky move around particularly for consumers. It sucks because like there's no good alternative. Like that's a really attractive offering for 3 very, very good Super Mario games. So it's kind of hard not to get that and to know that while they're only promising it for this short amount of time. And Nintendo tends to make pretty good on those threats because they've done this before. I'm sorry, I just did a verbal tick. Because they've done this before with console releases and more limited, not console releases, but you know the NES Classic Edition, the SNES Classic Edition. Those are both kind of limited run things, which made sense for them. I felt like you could make a good case for those being limited runs. That's being a very specialized kind of piece of equipment to release. But this is a game. Like it's a game bundle. There's just no good reason for it, and I think we've pretty well run out of things to talk about with this. So,
well, in lighter news for Nintendo, something that good was announced last week.
Yes,
Hyrule Warriors: Age of Calamity was announced last week. Which, if you want to know my full thoughts and opinions on that, I'm not going to get into them in here. There is a video on the channel with all my thoughts and everything about that. If you want to check that out,
yes.
The only thing I'll say, which I did mention in the video, though, is I'm excited partially because it's Zelda related, but also because this is the first Nintendo game in a while that is an actual new original game and not a remake of something else.
Yeah.
Because prior to this, the only thing we had was the new Animal Crossing, and that was about it for 2020.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I really enjoyed the previous Hyrule Warriors, and it's interesting to see kind of the shift in focus from being a kind of a Dynasty Warriors take on The Legend of Zelda or a Legend of Zelda take on Dynasty Warriors. I'm not sure which way you'd pitch that, but this seems to be much more focused on telling a story within the established universe, because it is a canonical prequel now to Breath of the Wild, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a very neat feature, very attractive feature, because I know there's a lot of Zelda purists who are really into kind of deciphering the timeline and, really getting into the story of Zelda. And Breath of the Wild did not scratch that itch for a lot of people. So hopefully this might bring in some of those individuals who maybe didn't care for the lack of story in Breath of the Wild, but still really liked kind of the overall aesthetic of Breath of the Wild and get to do something fun with it. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I'm not going to say much more because I have a whole video about it.
Very true. Go watch that if you want to know what Jeremy thinks about it.
I'm excited about it. I'll say that.
Yeah. Yes. All right. Speaking of other things to be excited about, Ubisoft Forward was also this last week. Man, there was just a lot of stuff happening last week. But they showed off some kind of not their didn't really seem like any of their main fare of games. It was more kind of the B team that came out for this one. Well, with the exception of one of the things that they talked about is kind of their B team lineup, if you will. A game that I was initially pretty excited about when they announced it a few years ago is Gods and Monsters has now been kind of rebranded as Immortals Phoenix Rising. And Phoenix is spelled all weird, Fenyx, if you're trying to look that up. I know, Jeremy, because I saw your notes in our doc, that you're a bit more excited about this than I am. Do you want to talk about that for a little bit?
No, you go first.
Okay. I was kind of disappointed by this gameplay look. I was really intrigued by the premise, particularly because Ubisoft nailed the Greek aesthetic in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. So to see them take a more, fantastical look at Greek mythology, I was pretty excited for. But then they showed off the gameplay demo, which struck me as kind of baby's first gameplay demo, with how basic and how like clearly telegraphed some of the stuff that happened in it was. And it just seemed a little uninspired. Like it's a mix of Breath of the Wild. It's a pretty 50-50 mix of Breath of the Wild and Assassin's Creed Odyssey, down to particularly from Assassin's Creed Odyssey. You have a lot of the sound effects from that game showing up in a lot of the exact same mechanics. And while I loved those mechanics in Odyssey, I was pretty disappointed to see those mechanics pretty much identically replicated in this setting. And this is very much within the ballpark of what I called Ubisoft the game, where it seems to be these big area controls, clear out type of games where you do kind of side missions here and there and keep getting new loot and upgrading, and pretty kind of generic almost. It just seemed a little bit uninspired from a gameplay perspective. From a graphical perspective, it looks really nice, but from a gameplay perspective, it was just, I was hoping to see something a bit more unique, and what I saw was just, okay, here's Breath of the Wild, and here's Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and that's it. So I think that's where my disappointment with it stems from. I'm sure it's going to be a perfectly fine game, but my hype died for it a little bit with that gameplay video.
So I am going to have to 100% disagree with you. I am very excited about this game. I am very hyped up. It is probably the most hyped I've felt about a game in a long time. I don't feel like it has that blanket Ubisoft the game feel that you've talked about before. Like you mentioned in our top 10 video games. But if to me, it feels like it breaks away from the Ubisoft the game, because while it is an open world thing, there's actually a ongoing commentary story that happens with this. The whole game is Zeus and Prometheus are telling the narrative, talking to each other throughout the whole game, and your character Phoenix interjects every once in a while, it sounds like, and there's a lot of humor because of that. And to me, it feels very much like a cross between Breath of the Wild and Fable because of that. Because there actually is an overarching story behind everything, and they're trying to bring some of humor that is like Fable-esque humor. Like the example I read, and someone that played the game said the Zeus and Prometheus are talking, and one of them breaks the fourth wall and mentions how the character does something. They're like, oh, they must have played the demo. Like, and so they're totally acknowledging the fact that they know that they're in a game. And so that kind of stuff does excite me, because I do see the Breath of the Wild inspiration by the different trials and tests you're going to have to do in the puzzle-y type things. But even those feel a little bit more different, because it's not just you go to a shrine and you go down and you do this thing and you get this. There are those, but then they have puzzles that are above ground also that don't just give you a item like I think what they said in the ones that are similar to the shrines from Zelda, you get a lightning bolt of Zeus to help with your stamina. Instead, it's the upper stuff is there's a lot more things you can potentially get item wise that you're doing these puzzles for. So to me, it seems it definitely, you can't deny it took inspiration from Breath of the Wild, just even the way it looks. Yeah. Which isn't a bad thing.
No, not at all.
But it very much feels different to me from what I've read and watched so far from another Ubisoft game, especially from Odyssey, because Odyssey I've played some as well. And the thing that really intrigues me that you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it's in Odyssey. The thing that drives the gameplay in Immortals, it looks like, is it's all stamina based. Like everything is based off stamina. You do have health, yes, but everything you do is based off stamina. So if you do too much, if you use your abilities too much, you don't have any stamina left.
Right.
And if you didn't bring any stamina potions, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
So I don't remember that being in Odyssey.
No, it's not. There's no stamina in Odyssey.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know that is in Breath of the Wild, but it's used in a different way. Stamina only came into play in combat if you tried to do like the spin move or different things like that. It wasn't every aspect of your combat.
Yeah.
So to me, it really comes across that there's a lot of puzzles to do in this game, but even combat itself has an aspect of some puzzly nature, because you can't just go in there and bash away and like you do in a lot of other games. So to me, this one has a more of an appearance of a more lighthearted type of RPG, which is not Ubisoft's forte. Most of their RPGs are very heavy.
Yeah.
So I'm very pumped. I'm very excited. I am trying to decide, like, it all depends what happens this week with Sony. If I have the capability to get a PS5, I will just get this game for PS5 since it comes out in December.
Yeah.
Rather than buy it on PS4 and upgrade it.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see what happens. I am very excited about this game.
Yeah. I don't blame you for being excited about it. It does have a really nice aesthetic to it. I guess I was just a little, I had hyped it up in my own mind of what the gameplay was going to be like, even though we saw absolutely none of it for so long. And then actually seeing it, it's like, oh man, that's just more familiar than I wanted it to be, I guess. But that's all right. It does look fun. I will say that. And I think I'll just need to be in the right mind space to be excited about it. Because I know, like, I'm not into the Greek stuff right at this moment, but I know I'll come around and be into that. And I'll be like, I want to play Immortals Phoenix Rising. And I'm still upset that they changed it from Gods and Monsters, because that was an easier name to remember in my mind. All right, let's talk about the next thing, which is Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time remake, which I thought looked fun and good. Many people on the internet did not agree with me, I found, looking through some comments. But the approach that they're taking with this remake is that they're building it from the ground up, which is really cool. Most of the time when a game gets remade, it's more of a remaster, and basically what happens is they retool the game to render at a higher resolution than it could before. So usually like an HD resolution, and they just kind of leave it at that, and just the game still plays the exact same as it used to. It seems like they're going in almost the opposite direction with this remake, where they're making it from the ground up so that they can retool a lot of the actual gameplay mechanics and like combat type things. So that's a bit more modern, while leaving the graphics maybe a bit more untouched. Did you have any thoughts on that route that they're taking with that?
So I'll be honest, when I was watching this, I was kind of thrown back just because of your mention of the graphics. Like, they were showing that they were doing like motion capture and all this stuff, and I'm like, yeah, but some of the stuff you're showing, it doesn't look like you've upgraded it to be current graphics.
Yeah,
like, it's an improvement based off compared to what it used to be, but it's not like a drastic improvement. So I need to see more, because that really confused me. Mm-hmm. When you see studios when they're gonna use like motion capture type stuff, you normally see a huge translation in the graphics. Yeah, and I just didn't see that from what they showed, and maybe that's because it was an alpha showcase. Yeah, and so they're just not done with everything yet. But I'm intrigued by this, because I think there's a big market out there for games that are older, of getting completely remade and getting a remake, because I know there's a lot of people that love Prince of Persia. Yeah. I personally not actually played them.
I have not either. Yeah,
I tried to play one of them. I never got through it. I don't even remember which one it was, but this is one where if they really can deliver and make it something that, on top of gameplay and being new, and can make it look really good, I may be more intrigued to try it out. But I didn't come out of that being like, ooh, Prince of Persia remake. Yeah. Yes, this is exactly everything I've been waiting for.
Yeah. And I wonder if part of that is a lot of the times when people are showing off a remaster, they make the mistake of not showing the game or how it originally looked kind of side by side. And it seemed like a lot of this remake, they just showed only the remake footage. So people had no comparison. And time has a funny way of affecting our memories of what games we thought looked like back then, because games, always look amazing when we originally played them, and then we go so long without playing them that they stay like looking amazing in our minds. But then we actually see them, and it's like, oh wow, that was really ugly, or that didn't age well. So I wonder if maybe some of that is coming into play here for some people. Obviously, not you or I. We never played Sands of Time or any of the Princes of Persia. Well, at least I haven't played any of the Princes of Persia or Prince of. I don't know how to make that more than one. Jeremy, pluralize. I don't know how to do that. Yeah, I've never played any Prince of Persia games, so yeah, I don't know. It seemed perfectly fine to me. So I don't get what people were upset about, but I don't know. Anyways, any last thoughts on that?
No, I again, it's hard for me since I never played any of them. I don't really have much of an opinion.
Yeah, hard same. Rainbow Six Siege. This is kind of one of the other big things that they talked about, and big is you put an asterisk next to that because that is it's not a whole lot to talk about, but it's next gen support was confirmed for Rainbow Six Siege, up to frame rates confirmed of up to 120 frames per second, which for a competitive first-person shooter is a pretty big deal. So good on Ubisoft for confirming some next-gen upgrades for that. And also that there would be a regional Rainbow Six Siege World Cup from kind of country to country, and then I don't know, I'm guessing that they would all end up playing against each other, but I'm gonna view this as my time to go pro in Siege and join an esports team. Are you gonna I don't think you play Siege at all, Jeremy, but you gonna join my esports team?
Sadly, no, I don't play Siege, so I would just bring your team down, so there's really no point in me joining because we wouldn't make it anywhere.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll just solo queue and I'll carry my own esports team, me against 5 other people. I'm just kidding. I'm not very good at Rainbow Six Siege. I'm not really good at many games, but Siege in particular, I'm really bad at because there's a lot of map knowledge you need for that game, and I do not have it. Anywho, that's kind of all our big game news for the week. Let's jump into a different entertainment medium and let's talk about DC Fandom Part 2. This one took us by surprise a little bit because you and I both forgot that was happening yesterday and didn't catch any of the news as it happened, but thankfully there wasn't actually a whole lot of news that was discussed. The one thing that stuck out to me that I still kind of baffled by, DC is expanding the Watchmen as part of the DC universe. They're going to be doing more DC comics. Specifically, there's going to be a Rorschach comic that takes place after the events of Watchmen, which if you've read Watchmen, that's a really interesting character to center a comic on, given the events of Watchmen. Yeah, any thoughts on DC Fandom Part 2, Jeremy?
The only thing I saw that seemed pretty newsworthy that came out of this, because this was a lot, there's supposed to be a lot more discussion when it came to some of the TV stuff, yeah. And even that didn't really have a lot, apparently.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing is they did have a little panel again on the Flash movie, where they did confirm that this movie is going to be a soft reboot for the DCEU. That is due to the fact they are following the Flashpoint storyline somewhat. They're going to be adapting it to what their needs, but it is going to be based off of alternate reality type world, and that's why the news that's come out of where Michael Keaton is going to be in it, and so is Ben Affleck. Mm-hmm. Like that's why, and they're saying there's going to be actually a lot of DC characters in this movie. That was confirmed as well. So you're probably going to see, this is probably going to be the DC movie where you see a lot of people in it that they wanted the Justice League to be. But this one will probably be that, but who knows, you may see versions of those characters you weren't expecting. But yeah, they have said this will be a soft reboot. This will be the movie that launches what's going to happen in the future for the DCEU.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting. I think it'll be the most interesting aspect of that is that it's going to really have to set the tone for the next slate of DC movies. Because I mean, we talked about this in our first Fandom episode where we covered a lot of this, but like the DCEU really struggled to gain its footing early on, and it has only recently kind of felt like it kind of landed on some firm ground. So to have them all of a sudden, they're going to soft reboot it. That could be kind of a risky move for DC Comics when it comes to that. I'm hoping that it's going to be really positive. Excuse me. I'm hoping that it's going to be really positive, but yeah, I think they've learned from their mistakes, or I'm hoping that they've learned from their mistakes, and they're just going to focus on some really fun, really cool projects that kind of gets them back into the mainstream and gets me into a new Superman movie where Superman is awesome again and not sad and mopey. But that's all I can really muster up on that subject. Any last thoughts on all this news, Jeremy? It's oops all news.
No, and that's the nature. Sometimes that's what happens. Especially once we're hitting this time of the year, we're in September, and I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to have more times when we have to discuss more news type things, because you have, let's just put it this way, 2 weeks ago, I did not have very many games on the horizon for me of what I wanted to play or get. And now in 2 weeks, you have in October, Star Wars Squadrons coming out, which we already knew about.
Yep.
But now in November, you have the Hyrule Warriors game, as well as new consoles coming out. And for me, you have Immortals Phoenix Rising coming out in December. And then on top of that, the remakes for the Super Mario 3D All-Stars coming out here. Actually, today's the 13th, so it comes out this Friday. That's that right off the bat. I'm like, I've added 4 more games to my list of. Yeah. I'm like, ooh, I want to get that, and I was not anywhere near that 2 weeks ago.
Right. Yeah, it's what an odd week. Just everything kind of came up, and it was pretty cool. And we were kind of struggling for a topic for today's episode, and all of a sudden, like, oh wait, we have all this news. Why don't we just tackle that and let people know about all the things that are happening? Because there are a lot of things happening, and it's excited to be it's exciting for gaming in particular, because we've had such a long drought of really solid info, and now we're finally starting to enter that home stretch where, all right, we've got a new console generation coming out. We know what games are coming out and what games are going to be coming out really soon and what we can be excited about. So it's great to be looking forward to that again. But with all that being said, that's been this episode of HitPoint. If you've enjoyed what you've listened to, be sure to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/thehitpointshow. As we said before, you can support us on patreon.com/hitpoint if you've really enjoyed what we've said and want to kick a few bucks our way every month. We'd really appreciate that. But if not, that's totally fine. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're on YouTube. We're on Twitter as well. Jeremy, do you remember what our Twitter handle is, or Twitter URL is?
It is twitter.com/hitpointshow.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing on Instagram. If you search HitPoint Show, you should find us there. And our subreddit as well as HitPoint Show. So outside of Patreon and YouTube, I think everything else is HitPoint Show. Yeah,
we're starting to get some consistency, and that's just because we're throwing it at every social media thing we can. That way we can finally get something going there. But that's all we have for this episode of HitPoint. I've been Andrew Jeffries.
And I've been Jeremy Robbins.
Thank you for listening, and please do keep an eye on your health bar. HitPoint is made possible by our generous patrons, E-Man and Doug Jeffries. Thank you so much for your support.